Good afternoon. It's January 14th, 1 month away from Valentine's Day, and 1 month away from Carnival. The love, the Valentine of Trinidad and Tobago. And wow, are we ready? There are lots of soca hits coming out and some beautiful music. What are they doing with all of this music? Is it all geared towards just Carnival? Or is it geared towards the world? Well, today we thought we'd look into that subject and really try to delve into how are soca artists marketing themselves. And not just how are they marketing themselves, but how can they better market themselves. So I thought I'd bring in someone who I think might know, because that's that's his raison d'etre. He's a digital strategist, and his name is Karen Rose, and he's with us this afternoon. Good afternoon, Karen.
Good afternoon, Mr. Kalipersad. How are you doing today?
You have a starboy name, Karen Rose.
I gotta thank my parents for that.
Now, you may be, some of the listeners may be hearing an accent, but the thing is, he is Trinidadian, born in Trinidad, but grew up in Canada.
Yeah.
And has somehow developed a career where he's a digital strategist, helping companies all over the world, really, develop their digital presence.
Yeah.
Perhaps you can tell us how you got into this career.
Yeah, so it is an evolution of where I started. So it kicked things off. When I've always had a passion for technology ever since I was a child. And when I turned 19, I had the lovely opportunity to work for a company called TELUS, which is like the equivalent of our Digicel, and you're selling technology, and you had to really learn the technology. From TELUS, I was able to get an opportunity to work at Apple, and Apple is, one of probably the biggest tech company in the world. And again, you had to learn the technology in order to be able to recommend and teach people and sell the technology. So when I moved to Trinidad some years ago, I was walking around just looking to see what the tech landscape was in Trinidad, and I realized that...
And you were so impressed, right?
I mean, if it was, if it was any different, I probably wouldn't be here, right? But I saw an opportunity because you couldn't go anywhere and learn in depth about the technology, right? And we have a piece of technology in our pockets. Probably we have our laptops, our computers. Like, technology pretty much runs the world. It's the baseline across any industry that you are in. And you learned that in Apple, you learned that in TELUS, and you had to be able to teach it. So seeing the opportunity where there wasn't really any space that you could learn about the technology, not just in Trinidad, but across the Caribbean, because they don't have the places that we would in North America, I decided to teach technology. I learned how to build a website. I learned search engine optimization to create my content, get the information out there, learned how to create videos, get the videos out there, and it kind of just grew from that. So moving into a digital strategy, when I was selling the technology with my Droid Island brand, people wanted to learn, hey, how are you selling your products and services online? How are you getting your products from point A to point B? How are you getting paid from people around the world? How are you doing all these things? I started to teach that and put that information out there in 2018. And then by the time the pandemic rolled around, I had a couple of years under my belt of teaching, and the pandemic was the great accelerator for me, because now everybody all over the region and diaspora, because you have a lot of people that are still tuning into what's happening in the diaspora, or they're trying to break into the Caribbean and they're from the diaspora. So when they were trying to break in, everybody would be calling my name to go and talk to this person to see what are the payment mechanisms, what are the tools, because everything that we know of in North America as to how to get paid online, how to take your business online, none of that is relevant here in the region. And then the Caribbean region, all the rules and regulations for each country are all different. So you have to learn each individual country and how to do it in each country. So I've kind of just specialized in that over the past couple of years. And for me, the journey just keeps on growing.
So in a general sense, do you think that we in the Caribbean, or Trinidad and Tobago in particular, effectively use this digital landscape?
Pieces of it. Pieces of it. I think we have done a really good job at one aspect, which is social media, right? But there's still so much more to building a digital strategy or building your digital presence that goes beyond social media, because social media still happens in silos. So you have some people who've mastered Instagram, you have some people who've mastered TikTok, right? But that's still happening in silos. So we haven't really mastered anything outside of social media. And if you are a business, the most important thing is, if you're a business, you got to get paid, right? The Caribbean does not have access to any of the e-commerce or payment tools on social media. So if I'm a business, I am constantly thinking about what are the other digital channels and platforms that I can use where I can grow my business and get paid, because I cannot get paid from social media. I can market, I can put content out there, but I still have to drive the social media traffic back to a platform where I can actually get paid.
So we've also got with us in the studio Nigel Campbell, who is a music analyst, and that's his really...
I got looks for that phrase, but keep going.
Well, the thing is, he has this finger on the pulse of what artists and performers are doing in terms of their music. But I wonder, in your observation, Nigel, how do you see our artists, and in this case, because it's Carnival and we're talking about soca artists, using the digital sphere?
Well, they have been using it for quite some time, right? What Karen is talking about is a kind of threshold by which we're supposed to go above, right? A lot of artists don't have websites, right? They don't have a kind of focus point, a landing page, whatever it is. And I think YouTube being a very popular way for distributing music, probably more popular than Spotify, Apple Music than that. They go through aggregators. Julian's Promo is a very popular one. Fox Fuse is another one. And as a consequence, the idea of them having a direct focus, certainly with an international market, is lost, right, as far as I see, right? Some years ago, Laura Dorich, my partner in my podcast, Music Matters, the Caribbean edition, sorry, shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
we used to go to these conferences put on by Music Teacher and other IP, and we'll always ask that question, a whole room of creatives and musicians, how many people have a website? I remember famously at Cipriani College, 100 people or more, and only 4 people had websites, right? And when we do look at the kind of landscape now in terms of what exists, certainly internationally, even among independent artists. I mean, it's all well and good to look at the Rolling Stones website or Taylor Swift website or Beyonce, right? But look at an independent artist. They have their categories, either how to book them, if they have music for sale or something like that. A lot of our artists create music that seemingly is temporary, right? It doesn't have a very long shelf life, but even with that self, you can create a song that has legs that can last for 20 years. Last time we spoke, we talked about one of those songs. So the idea of being able to sell your music, sell your services, should actually be focused on one point. There are very few artists who have that, right?
Yeah. Well, you know that singers perennially, at least in Trinidad, perennially complain of their music not being played on the radio or by DJs. We've been hearing that since...
And this is a radio station.
The old Calypsonian. But the thing is, I think that there are no gatekeepers anymore. In the digital age, the artist is able to use, their own media machines to build and demand their products. Now, you mentioned the website. Can you name 5 artists who have a website?
5 artists, off the top of my head. Well, I know Marshall has one. I know Destra has one. I know Keshav has one. I'm not monitoring many because they're not popping up in my head. Mm-hmm. I believe Patrice Roberts has one.
Voice just got one.
Voice just got one.
Now, imagine somebody of the reputation and experience and power of voice only just getting a website.
Man, we're talking like last month.
Yeah, wow. So Karen, tell me the importance and value. But let's discuss some ways of marketing yourself, really, and let's start with the website. Mm-hmm. I guess that is a starting point. Yeah. So tell me the value and power of and necessity of starting off with a website.
Yeah. So Nigel made some really, really good points, right? And your website is ground zero. It is home base for your brand, right? When you jump on Google, anything you search, 90% of the results lead back to a website, Whatever your query is, 90% of the results are going to lead back to a link to a website. If you start to look at what are some of the other things that pop up on Google, you'll see YouTube, you will see pictures, you will see products to Amazon or probably your website or a podcast as well, right? Your website should be the place where everybody should be able to learn everything about you, right? If you start to learn digital marketing as an artist, you will start to realize that your website can start to leave breadcrumbs all over the interwebs to then bring people back to your platform. Because what happens on social media stays on social media. You don't jump on a Google and type something in and then a social media post pops up, but your website content can pop up, right? So it can drive more traffic because there is no shelf life of content on your website or YouTube because they are a search engine. They index the content and they show it to you whenever somebody calls for it. But with social media, within what most people don't know is the shelf life of social media content. Social media shelf life for content is as low as 18 minutes on X, up to 7 days on LinkedIn. And Facebook and Instagram is 2 days before it goes to the proverbial graveyard, never to be seen again. And nobody really scrolls through all of your old content, right? And that's why social media is a never-ending beast. So you have to keep on feeding and feeding and feeding. But your website, it's always going to drive traffic. And that's why you can Google something and a piece of content that was produced 5-6 years ago that might be still relevant is still showing up top of the search because of its relevance. So if you are a artist and you start to understand digital marketing, you will start to understand the power of your website and how that can start to bring people into your brand and not just limiting yourself to social media. It's important, but you don't want to limit yourself.
And Nigel, you also run the risk of having an unimpressive static website because you've got to have a proper design or have the right people design it for you, because somebody can just have a website and it's dead, sort of.
So I'm glad you want to take that.
You tailor the content.
Well, one of the things is I have two websites, well, three actually. One with two of them have the .tt suffix, right? I'm not going to do another shameless plug, but what I do notice is website design evolves, right? So the website designs of just 4 or 5 years ago was a kind of particular design stylistically as it was. But nowadays, 2023 into 2024, it's a whole different design feature because it evolves with the phone. A lot more people access websites on the telephone than a laptop or a desktop, right? So that with the increase of power, functionality, and even the software development, people are looking at different ways to keep you attracted, admittedly, right? But as Karen has said, you have to have a kind of starting point, a landing page. I don't know if that's the accurate term, but somewhere we can say, okay, I'm going to see everything on Marshall. I get to a point. And from there, I can morph and go to all the different areas in terms of purchase. One of the things that always bothers me as I think is the idea that a lot of our music is not sold, right? We create music, so artists create with producers, pay each other. There's a transaction happening there, and they put their music put their music out like a calling card, so that becomes the entree to get gigs. Because admittedly, the live music industry pays more money than streaming, right? Way more money. So as a consequence, the idea is not so much to sell a single. And because the music is singularly attached to Carnival, unless you live in multiple Caribbean islands or in the diaspora, your Carnival season is X amount of weeks. And after that, it's almost like a Christmas song. It doesn't have any relevance any long after.
Karen, I've observed that this year, no, I'm not really deeply involved with the Carnival, but from my observation, I'm hearing some really nice soca songs. The music seems to me to exceed previous years, really excel. But it seems that the focus of 90% of the songs is Carnival. And after Carnival, I don't know if they have any value.
So, great point, right? Let me answer that, and I want to add something to what Nigel was saying. So, I was listening to an interview with Shaggy, and he was talking about his collaboration with Kes. No, sorry. I was listening to an interview with Kes, and he was talking about the collaboration with Shaggy, right? And he was like, one of the main reasons why soca music could never grow, and it's reached a ceiling, is that it could only ever fit into, it always has to fit into a carnival. And as Nigel just said, that carnival window is short. And if the music that you are creating is always having to fit into a short season, then, you know, that's why they're running around trying to get gig after gig after gig in as many carnivals as possible in order to make a living, and the music could never live on. Now, with respects to your website and having dynamic content, what makes a website dynamic is the content that you are going to produce on your website, because your homepage is relatively static, your about page is relatively static, it's not going to change too often, your contact page is relatively static. But you see that piece of content that you have for your blog, your article section, that can house audio files, videos, your write-up content. The content you produce is what's going to be dynamic and keep on leaving breadcrumbs. And what people don't know is, if you were to start learning digital marketing, one of the skill sets that you learn in digital marketing is how to extract data from the search engines like Google, like Bing, like Yahoo. And those search engines collect the most amount of data on humans in the world right now. And as a digital marketer or digital strategist, you're learning how to extract that data in any country, in any market, surrounding any single term. And then you could start to tailor the type of content that you're putting out. And that's going to bring back people to your page. So that's what makes your website dynamic.
But how critical is it for us to have dedicated professionals managing your site, rather than it's my site and I do my thing? And
so I'll say it like this, right? When you're starting out, you probably don't have the resources, right? I have become
because
as skilled.
I was going to say that
that costs money.
You have young neophyte artists who need a website, but they don't have the resources.
They may know their thing a little bit.
People, listen, we have the resources. It's just that people are not educating themselves, right? So I've become as skilled as I am today because I started off with no money and no resources to build everything that I have built step by step, right? I watched a lot of YouTube videos. I read a lot of articles. I was in a lot of forums. None of that costs money. It does cost time, right? You can't be broke and not have the time. If you don't have the time, then you better have the money. And if you don't have the money, then you better go and find the time to go and learn. And that's what 99.9% of people are missing the point. They don't want to give the time, they don't have the money. So if you're in that situation, then you're stuck, right? But you can learn how to market your business and build your brand for next to nothing. And then when you get your business or you get your brand up to a level, and now you're starting to generate some money, then you can start to invest. My first investment wasn't into no $1,000 US courses. It was in books. Books that I could buy that were cheap, that gave me more information, more pieces of the puzzle. And then when that brought me to another level, then I could start to invest in new courses, and it just keeps on going, right? But that is the big problem that most people are not willing to do. It's either you're going to have the money or you're going to have to go and find the time to go and learn.
A lot of artists nowadays are actually, some of them have teams, and I think it's kind of mantra in terms of the music.
You mean friends?
Well, your phrase, not mine, but they have a team, right? And the team may not be necessarily a professional with an MBA or something like that, but they do have a team, a publicity, a person, of course, a booking manager, which becomes /manager. But what I think, what is being brought up here in terms of what Karen is talking about is that the information and the knowledge keeps evolving. And you have to step up your game, step up your game, step up your game. And you have to have a kind of goal and a threshold. And I think this is one of the things that I think is critical. People are just seemingly happy to get gigs in Trinidad, which will then lead to gigs up the islands and ultimately into New York, Toronto, Miami, London, if possible, right? Whereas nobody's interested in having a song that has legs on its own, that gets the interest of, or the air of a distribution label or whatever the deal is, to get into markets outside of the Caribbean diaspora, here and abroad, right? So as a consequence, their focus is, this is what it is, and once it's over, I look for 2025, because 2024 is over.
So could part of the problem be that apart from being a superstar like a Marshall or a Kess or a Destros or your up-and-coming artist, that perhaps the artist is not approaching the work as if he were a business. he were a product. He's just focusing, oh, I'm a creative and I love to sing songs and I can compose at a moment's notice and so on. It's like a fashion designer, you know, you love designing pretty dresses, but you're not thinking of yourself as a business.
I'm glad you brought that up. I had the opportunity to share a stage with Alison Hines, right? And in that conference where we shared the stage, she was asked, looking back at your career, what is the one thing you wish you learned at the very beginning? And she said, I wish I learned the business of music. She's like, because everybody is a creative and they understand how to be creative and they're constantly working at how to be a better creative. And that's where they fail. And that's why they're kept back, because they keep on trying to work on the wrong things. If you learned the business side of the art form, if you learned the business side of music, you would be way further ahead and you'd be able to position yourself way better than if you just kept on working on the creative. And it's the same thing with me. As a digital strategist, as a content creator, I'm constantly learning the business of content. Whereas creators that we see on YouTube are constantly looking at how to be a better creator. But that doesn't make you more money. That doesn't give you longevity if you're only focusing how to be a better creator.
Okay, so we spoke about the importance of having a website. But we sort of sounded a bit indifferent about using the social media platforms, which has a short life and so on. But what I have noticed is that so many of these soca artists focus on, apart from Fayan and Bungie and maybe Destra a bit and Nadia Batson, they focus on putting their music on the social media rather than developing content that is of a wider interest to their followers. I would think if you're an artist, yes, I know your song. How many times you're going to sing the 3 songs that you have? And in order to keep interest, then you need to tailor your content to include maybe things about your lifestyle, your thoughts, and so on and so on. Are they effectively using TikTok and so on?
Voices. I think Voice utilizes social media better than a lot of the other artists out there. And during the pandemic, he had this Vibing with Voicey, which owned social media, and he won that whole area in terms of social media. The idea of
that's just one person.
Well, I mean, understand something. We can't. I know the easy thing is to compare ourselves with what happens in Manhattan and Los Angeles and that kind of stuff.
No.
But volume is volume. We just have a very small market.
Somebody who lives in Sao and Chaguanas who's interested in this artist wants to know more about them, and you would increase your followers on TikTok and
do
XYZ.
They understand the power of the
They have
brand?
different kinds of content.
I often wonder if the idea of putting your whole life out there is beneficial to our market and our context here in Trinidad and Tobago.
So
I'm always wondering about that. It works well in America, Europe,
here's
but I'm
the
not
thing,
sure it
right?
works well
Here's
in
the
Trinidad and
thing.
Tobago.
So
there's similarities in human beings, and if you put yourself out in the public space, to
everybody's
me,
a Mako. I don't know.
Yes, but that's what social media is.
escapism. So yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think Voice has used social media better than almost anybody. The problem I have with Voice, and my only criticism is, it's just one platform, and he could have done so much more with the content that he was creating, right? But that's just I loved what he did with Vibes of Voicey. Now, when you're thinking about an artist creating content, they don't have to put their entire life out there. Most people don't, right? But I'll tell you this: if one of my favorite artists is Skinny Fabulous, I know almost nothing about Skinny Fabulous, and I would love to see Skinny Fabulous, how he writes, because he's an amazing writer. I would love to see the process. I would love to see him in studio. Take me on a journey through your content. And if you do that on a platform like YouTube, because as I said earlier, so none of the social media platforms allow us to monetize or give us any form of remuneration. YouTube is the only platform in the Caribbean that does, and it's the platform that we neglect the most because YouTube and TikTok is the sexy platform, right? But if Skinny Fabulous is taking me through the writing process. You're making music all the time. If you're taking me behind the scenes in the tours, if you're bringing me on your journey, guaranteed I am watching on YouTube, and every view you get, you're getting paid. And now when you start to say things like, hey, I am doing an exclusive in studio, you can watch me, you can tune in and watch me, $5. I'm paying every single time because I like the artist and I could support. But we're not thinking, or majority of the artists are only still thinking about gigs. They're not thinking about, if you learn how to build this digital presence and this brand, what are the other ways that we can now monetize
Other streams of revenue.
Right? And I'll give you, and we'll continue the conversation, but I'll give you an example of that monetization and a case study I did on Nadia Batson last year that went kind of through the movie and it fits into this conversation.
I think Ricardo Drew was pretty transparent on social media, wasn't he?
Yeah. Now, again, right? Having a robust digital presence is you learning all of the channels that you have available to you, right? And when you're only doing it on Instagram, social media operates in a silo. It's only doing it on Instagram. So it might not have the biggest benefit that you could possibly get. But if you learn the other channels, like your website, content on YouTube Shorts, your email list, having a podcast, when you start to learn the vast digital platforms that are out there, then again, Instagram is just Instagram. So you could have I have 12,000 followers on Instagram, but there are more people that recognize me than a lot of people that have 10 times the following. And that's because you can find me in the papers, because I write for Newsday, I write for Jamaica Observer, I'm on radio, I'm on TV. Nothing about me is contained to just Instagram. I have every single, right? And that is where there are much bigger people that have a lot to share, could start to implement and build that robust digital and traditional strategy.
Sounds interesting. I often wonder about the kind of content that people. You gave an example of the development, the writing process, right? And I have noted certainly among people who listen to me and write and listen, a lot of people don't read. But once you get into, I know there's a kind of time frame, the attention span has dropped. So if you're going to put Skinny on, Skinny has to tell me how to make that song in a minute, 60 seconds or less, right?
Could be done.
Right? I'm sure it can be done. But I've often wondered about how much interest is there for certain aspects of the thing. People, we kind of jokingly said the Marco factor. So tell me something about your personal life, sure. But telling me something about the nitty-gritty of the business of music becomes almost...
If you look at how other businesses and consumer providers develop tastes in a market. You can develop a taste in a market. I mean, who knew about Piedrax before they started selling Piedrax?
The thing is, Nigel,
and they help people acquire a taste.
Remember, you always have to remember that the things that you put out is not always going to be for everybody, right?
For everybody.
And
so this you have, almost,
I mean, yes. we had a conversation the other day where we were talking about how the acoustic versions are getting a lot of traction.
Yes.
And that's because there are a lot of people that don't like soca. There's a lot of Trinis that do not like soca.
Trust me.
But then you drop an acoustic version, and all of a sudden now you've tapped into a whole new audience of people who would have never listened to your soca version, but that acoustic version has, right?
Tedison John did that a couple years ago. He did a
and
kind of
what was the
jazz
and what
version.
was the
And it blew up in a big way. And he's back in Trinidad for a second time. He did the concert last. He's doing it again. And I remember thinking at that time, I wish other artists would understand that there's another way to sing a song, right? Soca, has beat the rhythm, all that kind of stuff, and the context of Carnival. But some songs have lyrics that could work well outside of Carnival. Do it another version. They say, nah, nobody want to hear that.
But also, there's a kind of flexibility about soca. I mean, we had the power soca and all those things. But I think people like Kes and so on have demonstrated there are different, varieties of this soca rhythm. It isn't all power soca. It isn't all about,
No, but it's still the soca sound.
But
it's
there's
still
of course
soca.
no,
But I
what
think
mean
I'm
is-
getting the
what I
impression they're
mean
talking
is
about
it
jazz
can-
it up a
it can-
little bit,
it can
lose it up a
attract-
little bit.
It can attract
Rocket.
different tastes, and
Experiment.
needs and
Like
so on.
you gotta experiment. And Nigel, to your point about people's attention span, right? I had a post 2 hours ago talking about how the Shannon Sharp and Cat Williams interview was another perfect example that people do not have short attention spans.
Those are 3 hours?
It was 3 hours.
Yeah.
They only have short attention spans to bad content and irrelevant content.
Irrelevant content,
Because I sit down and I watch an hour-long YouTube videos. When I'm purchasing equipment or I'm trying to learn something, I'm sitting there for an hour, 2 hours, whatever the case is. But if you do not have the ability to capture my attention, and in the post I was talking about, this is what people have to learn how to do. Because people are not just waking up and just doing an hour-long video and you're sitting through it. You have to learn how to hold people's attention, just like how you have to learn when you sing a song in studio and then you bring it to the stage. That's two different things.
Different things, completely.
It's like writing an article, I have a few lines or a few seconds to get your attention.
Correct. And you have to learn how
Headline
to
and
do
your
that.
opening sentence.
Yes.
Opening sentence.
And-
is
And
critical.
you have to
I know you
complete it.
teach. So when you're teaching, people have to learn how to craft that content to get people to
attention.
read.
Yeah.
But that's important because even teachers are always learning to do it better.
Teachers are the best
You know?
students.
You're
The
always
best teachers are the
learning
best
to do it
students.
better. And I wonder, do these creatives, we're pinning down to soca artists, do these soca artists recognize that development is about learning new all the time?
I don't think so, because the reality is, if that was the case where they were learning, then I wouldn't hear every single year nobody's playing my music, right? You would be learning that there are no gatekeepers. There are so many channels that you can build your base off of, and you can build your base to the point that the radio stations are now, or media in general, is now begging, hey, we have to get you on the program. We have to bring you in for an interview. You don't need them. Yes, it would be nice to have them, but what are you going to do? Are you going to sit here and complain that nobody's playing your music?
Yeah.
No.
I mean,
you can learn how to
there's
build your
one
base.
soca artist, Nigel, who I would probably never interview because we booked an interview 3 times and 3 times he didn't turn up. Nobody called to say I can't come. Nobody called to say there's
Well,
an
disrespect
issue.
of the
He
media,
just
of course,
didn't
has
turn up.
consequences,
So I'd
right?
probably never interview him.
Disrespect of the media does have its consequences. But as you were just saying about the idea of gatekeepers, I mean, based on traditional media, we knew about the idea of gatekeepers in terms of
Traditional, yes.
Traditional media, right?
Specifically traditional.
right. In social media, as you rightly say, we can develop different platforms, utilize different platforms to develop a base and audience base and that kind of thing. I just want to know, a lot of these things, are they free in terms of development of a platform or development of an audience based on TikTok, on YouTube, on
Yeah, access
Instagram?
is free.
Access is free.
Access is free on everything,
Yeah.
right? However, right, where
How
you spend your money,
capitalize on it.
well, where you spend your
Because
money,
I know you have to pay for
is-
algorithms to push you up a little further. Certainly
Well,
on Facebook.
that's one strategy. Like if you're gonna do a paid strategy, then yes, you can do that. But I haven't spent $1 on ads since 2018, and I've just learned. And this is where a lot of content creators have done really well. They've learned how to create good content so that they can just get and build a base and get traffic, right? And artists have a base; they can do that. But where you spend your money is now on the equipment that you're using. Because I could create a podcast for free. Right? There's free plans. I could use my phone and I could use my microphone headset and I can get a podcast out. Will it sound good? That's a different story. Where I'm going to spend the money, I'm going to go buy a microphone. I'm going to go buy the equipment, right? That's when you're creating videos, you could use your phone and shoot videos, and that's where TikTok has done an amazing job at making your phone content, portrait style videos go viral, and people have built a name off of that. But then when you want to get better, you're going to go and get a camera, maybe you hire a videographer. So access to everything is free. But when you want to start to up-level your content and up-level the quality, well, now you're spending money on the devices and the strategies, and maybe you have the hardware. That's where your money is really spent.
I think
How do you make money off TikTok as a content creator?
Oh boy, there's a lot of ways. There's a lot of ways. So I'm gonna use me as an example, right? So with everything that I do, blogging, live streaming, podcasting, TV, radio, social media, everything, right? Even if you're not getting paid, so when people think of monetization and making money, the thought process is limited to direct.
Yeah.
The platform paying them. Oh, TikTok's not paying me, we're not monetized. No. If you have a product or a service, then you building your brand and putting information out there is going to drive traffic to your DMs or to your website where people book a product or service. If you have an e-commerce ready website, you utilizing social media is driving traffic back to your website for people to add to cart and pay for your product or book your service. That is monetization. If you have built your name well enough, well, then they start to call you in different countries and say, hey, we want you to come and speak on our stage. Paid speaking is big money, right? When people want to learn, people book you for workshops locally and abroad. That is big money. When you are doing your podcasts, people start to reach out and say, hey, we love your podcasts. How much to get featured? Not just an ad, because I personally don't like to do promoting of companies, but if it's within my garden, companies reach out and say, hey, we want to sponsor an episode, we want you to interview us, and they will pay you to interview you, right? And if you have all of these channels to your disposal, right, radio, TV, this, that, the third, companies now look at you and say, hey, we want you to come and speak. We want you to come and do a workshop. Maybe we want you to even host, but we also want you to create content. We also want you to interview us. We also want to get featured on your platforms. And now that dollar sign, because everything that they want to do is just more and more money. And then before you know it, you have 50 grand in your pocket for one engagement.
So if, say, I do a podcast about music, how do I get a company interested in investing in it?
Nigel's taking notes.
I'm listening. Go ahead, keep going.
No, but this is a good one for Nigel to kind of take in, because you've been doing it with Laura for a while. You know, what has your experience been like? And then, you know, tell us about your experience, and I'll come in. And
well, initially, I mean, the way we started is because Laura and I are part of the same industry, and plus we have the same like, so we just had these long phone conversations. It was just a simple challenge. You know, we should turn this into a podcast. So we launched a podcast, and we did it, and it was just more or less a kind of fun thing to do. Kind of, there was no money involved, kind of stuff. Right? We did buy some microphones. That was the first thing we bought, microphones, right? And we've been doing it for some years. Of course, once COVID came around, of course, lockdown, we kind of intensified. The idea of trying to book artists, trying to book people to interview and not responding, that did pop up and thing. But then there was a kind of focus. I said, listen, let's focus on the wider Caribbean, because really it was about Caribbean music business as it was. And we were able to do interviews with people, Shawnee B in BBC, One Extra in London, Nolan Baines of 300 Entertainment in America. So we started to say, let's expand the base. It's not sexy stuff, admittedly. So therefore the numbers are not very, very large. But I think one of the things that we also have is content, right? We have this bank of content of interviews that we do have. But 2023 was supposed to be the turnaround year. We're going to really commercialize it in a big way. Laura got a job in Turks and Caicos. It's not impossible to do a podcast if I'm in Trinidad and she's in Turks and Caicos, but there was a gap in terms of what is happening, and 2024 is the year that we're going to really commercialize it the way that Karen is advising me now. Notes are going to be taken now.
Karen. To start to get your podcasts generating money, right? My ethos is always, does your content solve a problem? And who does it solve a problem for that has money, that is going to pay?
Who's going to pay for it?
Need?
Right? Does it address a need, right?
Address a need.
Admittedly,
because it can be intellectual and academic, and it doesn't address anything.
But it doesn't address anything. So why would anybody pay for it? Like, yeah, it's good.
Why are true crime podcasts so popular? I mean, what's the need in that? That's purely entertainment.
It's purely entertainment, but then people, if you've built a big enough base, then people are going to say, well, you have eyeballs, we want to tap in. So people are just going to tap into that. If you build that base on YouTube, where now you're getting paid for views, and remember, when you're thinking of true crime, we don't have no true crime in the Caribbean podcast, right?
Good market to get into.
Well, good market to get into. But with the US and North American other markets, they have every single platform that pays them for views. So True crime is always going to be interesting because it's good escapism. It's interesting storytelling. They've learned how to create good long form content and keep you engaged. And every single platform in the US and other markets pays you. For us, we still have to figure out what platforms should we be using so that we can get paid on these platforms. And if we're using a platform where I cannot directly get paid, then how are we going to get paid? So for me, my content is always addressing a problem. And because it's in digital marketing, e-commerce, digital presence, guess what? Every single company has that problem. Everybody, artists, business companies, everybody wants to get more eyeballs. So I'm always focusing on solving problems for them. And then I can get specific and say, this is how soca artists need to market. I've had content on this is how airlines / Caribbean Airlines should be creating content or whatever. And then you get these calls from these companies because you're providing examples and you're teaching and they bring you in. So that generates strategy sessions or consulting money. And then when you've built that presence, you've built that platform where you're able to showcase and teach, then you have companies that'll reach out and be like, hey, you teach a lot about technology. We are a tech company. You have eyeballs, and the eyeballs that listen to your program are eyeballs that we want checking out our stuff. So how much is it going to cost for us to get onto your platform? For Nigel, with what they do, he would have to have artists reaching out. But typically speaking, the artists are not really the ones reaching out to say we're going to pay to jump on board. Now, how many music labels do we have in Trinidad that
one effectively?
Right. So you're creating good content, but then when it comes to monetizing, who is going to pay for it? That's the question that you have to ask. For me, because I'm speaking about e-commerce and marketing that solves the problem for pretty much everybody, I just have to create focused content for each individual industry for them to see themselves in the content that I create, and then they would reach out.
Which draws you to the question one, market research. It's not what I like.
It's what the market likes.
It's what the market likes.
Now,
because I might like something and it
as
was
we
not
discovered.
sexy.
Yeah.
And then it's not that I don't have the talent, but I'm just sending the wrong content out.
Here's the thing, right? I'm so glad you said that because market research is the thing that nobody does. Nobody. And I'm going to show you something, right? This is part of what we do so I'm a certified search engine optimization specialist, right? This is one of the things we do for market research. Everybody grab their phone, right? And if you're listening, you can do this as well. Grab your phone. Go to your Google search bar, right? You could either go to Google Chrome or go to your Google search bar. Now I want you to type in, let's do, for us in the room, let's do this together. Let's type in, or type in something interesting to you. Type in one word, but do not press enter. So I'm going to type in music, right? Or better yet, I'm going to type in soca. All right? I'm going to type in soca. So type in the word into that search bar, but do not press enter. Now, what you're going to see is Google auto-suggest give you a list of things, right? The thing is, people have no idea what Google auto-suggest is. They just think Google is trying to predict what you're thinking. They don't know what Google auto-suggest is. So when you see a clock next to the word, the clock symbolizes what you would have searched for in the past. When you see a magnifying glass, pay attention, everybody. When you see a magnifying glass beside that search, that is showing you the top searches that have happened in the country you are physically in right now that have happened over the last 7 days. So me typing in soca has brought up, I just lost it. Me typing in soca has brought up soca 2024, soca music, soca brainwash, soca parang, soca warriors, soca Santa, all right? So this is just a small snippet of what the top searches that have happened in Trinidad using that word. And I can now take that information and turn it into relevant content to put out on my platforms.
Wow. So I just typed in Trinidad. And you said the clock means
what you've searched for in the past.
What they searched for in the past. And the
magnifying glass is the top searches in the last 7 days of where you are physically.
The top searches for the word Trinidad in the past 7 days were Trinidad Express and Trinidad Guardian.
Trinidad Weather and Trinidad
people
News.
Looking for news.
People looking for news?
People looking for news.
The news that they say nobody reads and nobody watches anymore?
Well,
Yes,
I
exactly.
lived abroad, and I gathered you lived abroad also.
Trinidad Express is the top
Is that a hard
Trinidad
copy?
Guardian.
I know that the newspapers, certainly when they lived abroad, were the number one Trinidad websites, and that they had that going for them in a big way. Trinidad, Express, I don't know if you could advertise them on the station. But Trinidad news definitely was a big thing when you were living abroad. But there's something that they autofill, which I guess is something I also have. And Trinidad Express did come up. But when I went to soca, I got socanews.com, right? Which, kudos to them. Because I never searched their name, but the thing came up. And then in the listener, there was Soca News came back up again. And of course, as you said, Brainwash 2024, Soca Parang kind of stuff, right? But the idea of getting the autocomplete focuses on your website. To get that means that somebody had to already search it and type it in on your particular individual.
So what you're looking at is the top searches in the country. So we're physically in Trinidad.
Anywhere, anyone.
From anybody, right? Now, that's part of the market research. You need to know what the audience wants. So whatever you type in, right? Whatever you type in. If I type in, I'm going to type in pancakes, right? Type in pancakes, and the pancakes that comes up is pancakes fluffy recipe, pancakes from scratch, pancakes without eggs, pancakes without milk, pancakes calories, pancakes for one. If I'm a chef and a content creator, then I would create the content, right? And remember, like I said before, if you search for anything, 90% of the results is a link to a website. So that means I need to create the content that people are looking for, get it on my website. I would then need to get that content onto YouTube because YouTube's a search engine as well. And because I know people are actively searching for it, that allows me to now create relevant content on social media. And that gets away from creating all this irrelevant things that nobody's searching for.
So if I'm in Brooklyn, a soca artist based in Brooklyn, as opposed to a soca artist based in Port of Spain, and I do that kind of search, the result that would influence my content would be different.
Yes, but you also have tools. Now, I'm just showing you a quick and free way.
Sure.
We also have tools that allow us to specify the country that we want that extracted data from. So I could be in Brooklyn and be like, well, I want to know what's happening in St. Vincent because St. Vincent Carnival is coming up, and I can then conduct my searches, and I could then create. Guess what? I could now create my music based on things people are looking for, and that can help drive traffic back to the platform. Or I can create content on my website that again drives traffic back, because if you are creating things, how search works, if you are creating things that nobody's looking for, then no one's going to search it. No one's going to search it, right? But if you, as the brand, as the business, as a creative, you understand how to get that extracted data on the humans of the world in whatever market, around whatever topic, you can now tailor your content to what people are looking for, and that's going to allow you to bring people back to your platforms. And what I do is I do like a 70-30 mix. I create content 70% based on what people are looking for. That other 30%, you don't know what you don't know. And if I'm constantly learning, I'm going to know things that you're not going to think of to search. So that 30% allows me now to create the things that you're not actively looking for. But I do 70-30 because I want the traffic coming back. I want whatever you search for in my industry, I want me to show up. And that way that builds that trust. So when you start to see things that you have no idea about, I am already a trusted source for you to believe what I'm even talking about.
Which brings me back to my earlier point about the content provided by the soca artists, right? And I was trying to make the point that it's more than just the content, it's more than just the music, but you need
more than just pictures of you on stage.
Pictures of you on stage. As for instance, I mean, Fayan puts cooking and exercising and different things about her.
She understands her audience.
I think she understands her audience, and I don't think many of the soca artists recognize that or do that in order to broaden interest in their.
Karen, have you done any kind of research based on what Dominic is asking here in terms of who's engaging well and who's not engaging well? In terms of like I don't know if there's a metric scan that you could do to see who's being engaged. One of the things that I had done this piece about soca artists and engagement. And there's a particular, I remember famously I got an assignment to interview an artist originally from Tobago who was living in Trinidad. And he had been, signed up on all the distribution channels. He was on Fox Views and all these things. And he had his he had his own individual YouTube page, right? And he had over 20-something songs, and I had never heard any of them, right? And he had only recently got in with a name, that kind of well-known producer as it was. But when I looked at his YouTube numbers, he had a song that was like 5 years old, and he had less than 20 views. And I'm thinking to myself, I said, well, what did he do? Because you talk about creating content that is not sexual, that nobody wants, right? But how do you measure that? Because the simple thing is, okay, you go and you look at the numbers on a particular date, you balance with the number of years that this particular content has been online, and you could kind of work out a thing. But in terms of engagement, who is being engaged? Are you able to do research so that you could have some kind of actual metric? Because as long you obviously you know your stuff, right? But there are a lot of people talk without knowledge, and they quote us, they just say something, and opinion becomes fact for a lot of people. But if you have data, we always hear this phrase: data is what runs the music industry now, right? Do you have data? Do you have access to data? Or are you able to access data that can rank the quote-unquote popular? I know Chartmetric is a company that ranks popularity in terms of Spotify streams, as well as the number of likes and all this kind of thing, and engagement on all these social platforms, and they rank it and create like Taylor Swift is #1 or something. So you can do it. But are you doing that kind of research? Because I'm keen that now that we're in this carnival season, we're having this conversation, that we put out some actual facts so that people can no longer say, well, we know what you're talking about, or that kind of stuff. So that people can actually say, well, no, this is what happened. We were able to check all your metrics, and we saw that after 5 months of this particular song, you only had 50,000 views. And people are happy that they got 1 million views. Somebody released a song yesterday and in 9 hours had 9 million views. Admittedly, it's not a Trinidad artist, right? But the idea of engagement becomes, I think, specific to the space.
I think the biggest problem that we have is because we have so little of people who are working with artists that understand digital. You don't really have anybody with any of the infrastructure set up for you to measure anything outside of social media, right? So you can see streams on Spotify. You can see who has followers. There are a couple of tools that help us rank your engagement on Instagram, whatever. But the majority of the artists don't have websites. They have an Instagram page. Majority of them are not on Instagram. Right? The majority of them are not on TikTok. Right? Mm-hmm. They have so little to even talk about, right? And this is where the conversation is coming into play as to how do artists get better. And it's about learning the digital world and the spectrum of all the things that you could do. Because as of right now, like Voice does amazing on Instagram. That's it. We have guys who have built bigger platforms because they've understand how to leverage TikTok. So like one example I like to use is there's a guy out of Barbados called Fada Phyllis. Fada Phyllis has built a bigger platform on TikTok than the majority, than Voice, than Destra, than a lot of artists that are more established. And he's obviously not as big as those guys because he's relatively new, but if he did not do what he did, he wouldn't even be booked. He wouldn't have got some of the songs that he has built to the levels that it has grown to. And that's because he's learned how to build that platform. But again, that's still just on TikTok. Mm-hmm. So what I would like to see, because nobody's done it, not Mashal, not Kess, not Nile, nobody's done it. Nobody has built a robust digital strategy that incorporates all channels, from website, search engine optimization, YouTube, podcasting, email lists, push notification lists, SMS lists. Nobody's built this big, ginormous digital presence where now you could say, wow, this is an amazing example. All we have is Voice does well on Instagram, Fada Phyllis does well on TikTok, and Mashal has a website. But even the people that do have websites, there is no good example of who is using it properly.
Just to remind our listeners, we are talking to Karen Rose, digital strategist, the one with the accent, Trinidad one, and Nigel Campbell, music analyst. You're happy with that title, Nigel?
I got the name. I never said no. I always say I'm a writer, and I've been focused on the music industry in Trinidad and Tobago.
Music reviewer.
Plus some other things, yes.
You know what I would have loved to have seen, and I haven't seen it. I mean, we talk so much about, it's carnival season. No artist has jumped out and said, you know what, let me go partner with Express or Guardian and start to create a carnival piece.
I think it works the other way, doesn't it? The Express has to come to them as opposed to them. Well,
that's my point. That's my point. That's my point.
In addition to which, I made a point about constantly learning. We see Marshall Montano going to do his masters in Carnival Arts and so on and so. But I have never heard of any of the artists saying, let me find somewhere where I can learn how to improve this digital experience.
Yeah. And that's because, so I'm also a teacher. I'm also a workshop facilitator with UE Lockjack on digital marketing. And I'm also a program advisor to the University of South Florida for digital marketing.
Any
right?
soca artists in your class?
Absolutely not. None of them, right? But at the same time, too, where the Caribbean is challenging, and this is part of my own personal journey as to why I've been traveling so much. We don't really have any events that are expertise-led events where you can go and learn. A lot of the programs that you have in UE and Lockjack, and I'm there and I'm looking at the programs, are not up to par with what people are learning around the world. It's still kind of outdated. So there's not many places for you to learn how to do the digital marketing thing to the level as to where the rest of the world is.
But they're online programs.
Now that's the other part,
Available.
right? There are online programs that are available, and we just don't have people in enrolling in them. And the thing is with digital marketing, I know you know your stuff, and I know you're doing what you're doing because everything in digital marketing is visible. If you don't have a website, you just don't have a website.
Yeah.
If I Google you and you're not showing up for your space, you're not good at SEO. If you don't, if I'm not on your email list, you don't have an email list. If I'm not on your SMS, if you don't have any of these things, you just don't have it. So the fact that I can only follow you on Instagram and there's no way for me to support you outside of double tap, right? And that kind of brings me back to a point I wanted to get to with a case study I did with Nadia, well, not with, but on Nadia Batson. So last year, Nadia Batson's team released merchandise. I thought the merchandise was lovely. Shout out to whoever designed it. The merchandise was amazing, right? I was going to buy it. I had no intention of going to the concert, but I was going to buy the merchandise because I liked what they did, right? And I like her music in general. When I went to buy the stuff, there wasn't a website for me to buy. So what they wanted you to do was they wanted you to send an email. When last have you purchased a product via an email, right? So you had to email them. Then they responded, and I emailed, right? Because I wanted to see what this process was like. They responded 26 hours later, right? With information as to how to place the order. We then responded back. They took another 16 hours, right? And then only to find out that you could only pay, well, you could pay online, but the pickup was you had to go to the event. Now you have a lot of people that if she had a somebody around her that knew e-commerce, digital strategy, whatever, you would have had the website or any one of the print-on-demand websites that are available. Put your designs there, and somebody could buy, and then there could be an option for pickup. If I was going to the event, I could pick it up at the event, or I can buy and then have the order shipped to me, and that way you make money from anywhere around the world. Because you know what the number one comment was on the post for the designs? I'm not in Trinidad. How do I buy? Or I'm not going to the event. How do I buy? How do I buy? And everybody's disappointed because they're not going to the event, but they still want to buy.
What that sounds like, though, is a kind of workaround. The idea of sending an email is a workaround for the deficiencies that you noted at the beginning of this conversation about we don't have online e-commerce facilitators, like whatever the name
But we do.
is.
We just, people, you can't go anywhere to learn about it outside of literally KarenRose.com. That's a problem. That's not hyping me up. I complain to the banks. You guys have all the e-commerce tools for everybody. None of you are business owners inside the bank, so you're not educating. If you're not a business owner, you can't. It's very hard for you to educate a business owner if you're not a business owner, right? To you, these are just things the bank offers, but you don't know how to position the solutions to a business owner. So we have all the e-commerce tools and solutions to run an effective online business. There's just nobody that is putting out the information besides me, and we need more people doing that in order for people to learn how to do it.
But surely the banks have a responsibility to promote that.
Tell the banks that.
You know, surely they
Didn't
They
the
don't
central
feel-
bank just do something?
they're small business enterprises that surely
They
would
put
want
out
to use
ads.
them.
Ads?
They put out ads.
Cold ads on the newspaper.
But an ad is not content. Content is going to educate me and enlighten me.
An ad is not effective communication.
No, an ad is, we have this. Content is telling me how this is going
this
to
works.
work. How am I going to use this? And that is what no business does. They put out ads, but they don't put out content to educate people so that I can see how I can now utilize this into my business and my processes.
So talking about content, I'm no expert. I'm trying to sound like one. But you mentioned earlier about the quality of content that some of the artists put out, and the need for that they put out content. But it would seem to me to be a good idea if you're producing content in one way, and you think it's a great way because it reaches a certain demographic or so, that it may be in your interest to develop partnerships or relationships with other content creators who may be reaching other demographics that you're not
That's definitely a strategy.
Aren't we in a competitive industry though? The music industry we are all still competitive. So it may sound great on paper that we'll work together collaboratively. But as we've seen, certainly within the music industry, collaboration is a very difficult thing.
Well, funny enough, that's why this year, this particular year, everybody's like, wow, there's collaborations out the wazoo.
Well, collaborating on songs is one thing because people are probably going to tie in and tap this market and tap that market. But when in terms of that idea, there's still a business. I'm still competing against a particular artist.
There's a young man on TikTok who seems to be developing quite a following, and he started off doing these dances in his living room with his mother, right? And he's experimenting with different content and so on and so on. Right now he's creating let's call him a Karen dating show, right? And to me, if an artist links up with him, he would be reaching a demographic that he's not currently reaching.
Now,
there's a way to create and devise content and to manipulate the content to serve a certain audience.
I agree. And this is one of the strategies that artists can do. They can partner with content creators to create content. One of the reasons why Father Phyllis out of Barbados built such a big platform was because TikTok allows for collaboration with any and everybody via the remix features, right? So he would issue challenges to his audience, say, hey, create your own verse. So he would create your own verse.
Exactly.
He would sing the hook, and he'd be like, "Hey, I want to hear the best verses from you."
I would have thought a smart artist would have capitalized on the visit of the Ghanaian.
You know why? Because
I'm not saying specifically him, but an opportunity was there to associate with somebody like him, maybe not necessarily him, but he has over 1 million followers.
It's because nobody knew who he was when he came. Like, nobody knew who he was. When he first came, every comment was, who is this guy, who is this guy, who is this guy? And by the time people realized,
and I'm not in the game.
Right. Well, a lot of people didn't, right? But then you also don't have, and I mean, just look at a lot of the artists' content that they create. Outside of music, they're not really showing a creative side outside of music.
Nobody's doing food,
right?
I was just wondering, because food seemed to be a thing that I thought would have been a very popular.
Food is a big thing,
and I know we had a couple food influencers who came to Trinidad and did tours now and took us around places and some locals, and some locals, of course, work with them, kind of thing. But as you're talking about the idea of some of this content, I just wanted to put this in that.
I just wanted to get a satisfactory exploration of collaborating with other minor content creators.
I just don't think artists, for the most part, have not put on their content creator hat. They're creating the music, and that's about it. And they're not really doing anything outside of that. And that's what we're talking about. Like, I think if artists started to learn how to be content creators, they would start to create more content, more versatile content that would allow them to tap into other audiences and bring people along for the ride. So it's not just the music. Like, we shouldn't just hear about you when you're performing, because at that point, we're going to see you perform the same song the entire year. I'm over it, right? And like I said, I love my favorite artist is Skinny Fabulous. There's a lot of things I would love to see out of him, right? But the reality is, I hardly follow along because I'm always going to get a new song. Cool, that's good for the beginning of the year. But then the rest of the year is him posting a picture, him showing me clips of him on stage performing the same songs the entire year. That is stale, and that is all that we really get from artists.
What about the idea of an artist, Nyla Blackman has this thing, she has a song called Wrong Done Rosie, and there's a particular dance. And a lot of women are doing the particular dance. You know, you're back to the camera and everybody does it, right? And it's seemingly building a lot of numbers, of course, a lot of comments, a lot of male engagement of the videos and that kind of stuff. But is that a very useful strategy? Clearly, in my eyes at least, it's working, right? No, in terms of building Nyla's profile, right? But in terms of building a brand, if every soca artist decided create a dance for my particular song, is that strategy a useful one going forward? You know these kind of things.
I would say this, right? That's one strategy,
and it may be a short term,
and it's a trend, right? It's a fad. It's a fad, right? And it's gonna be lightning in a bottle. And if you can get lightning in a bottle, like Nyla knew exactly what she was doing, right? Yeah. You got your eyes. It got a lot of people's eyes, right? That's cool. So that might bring new eyeballs to Nyla's platform. But now that you have me, now that you've invited me into your house, now that you've brought me into the house, what else?
Where's the sorrel and brandy?
Where's the sorrel and brandy, right? What else? Like, and that's the problem. Now that you and that's where virality it can work in the opposite end. Because after you've made this viral thing, everybody's chasing virality.
So it may be that they're doing this by VAPs and not by strategy.
Well, some of it is strategy, because some of them knows. Like, again, Nyla knows if I do a competition of Shake Your Behind, she knows what it's going to get, and she has a very good song to go with it.
And behind,
right? So she knows.
Dominic Kalipersad said that.
She knows what she's doing. But again, it's lightning in a bottle. When I get here, what else are you giving me? And that is what people are not thinking about. Everybody's chasing trends / fads, but there's no substance in what you are putting out. Like, Nyla is so versatile. Again, if Nyla was to showcase her writing process, if she was to showcase, her, because she to me in my mind, Nyla is somebody who sits in a forest somewhere and looks at butterflies and plays the guitar. I would watch, because that's a whole different side. Like, experiment, right? Figure out what type of content you don't ever know what's going to work until you experiment.
That's an important time. Experiment. And people would value seeing that unfolding.
People value it.
Oughtn't be afraid to experiment on that platform.
For 2023, my most impactful piece of content I've done, and I never thought it was going to grow to what it did, and it turned into me traveling to do talks on it, was I did a series called Companies Are Wilding, where I'm looking at marketing jobs. Remember, I'm in marketing, right? And I'm looking at companies posting marketing jobs, and they're condensing 10 marketing roles into one for a minimum wage salary and putting it out there and then saying people don't want to work. So I was reviewing the companies I'm calling out. Well, I'm not necessarily calling them out, but I'm reading your job posting. And that became my most impactful piece of content, where now people from the States, people from the UK, heck, my mom back in Toronto was like, she's like, we have nurses. She saw a nurse pull up one of my videos and use it as a case to talk about how she's being overworked in her role in a hospital back in Toronto. So you never know what is going to work until you try. But my thing is always, don't chase the trends. Find out how to go viral off of substance. And if you can go viral off of content of substance, you're going to hold people in a whole different way than if you just danced and shook and jive every single piece of content. And
shock and jive. So very pointed words, boy. I hear you. Shock and jive. I heard that.
Is an underlying challenge the lack of a business culture, which is 100 years old. So the new generation are still hustlers.
You make a very good observation. Yes, and I would go as far as to say, as to me, I've been in Trinidad. This is my 10th year in Trinidad, right? And I have now started to feel like Trinidad is the ceilings are too small, the walls are too small, because I'm not seeing anything when I travel. I'm not seeing any of the things being implemented here, and it's a lot of basic things. So because we don't have this culture that is focused on learning and innovating, everything stays the same, and it looks the same, and it feels the same. And I'm doing the same things in Trinidad that I was doing when I just came. Yeah. That is worrisome, right? So, and I've only been here a short time. So I can't imagine when people who have been here their entire life say, this is how we've always done it, and this is how we're going to keep on doing it. And the rest of the world is passing us by, and because of technology, the problem is now exasperated. So now more people in business need to start traveling, even if it's to, Latin America or somewhere, but you need to start traveling with your eyes wide open, get into other markets in other industries, start taking lessons from what you are seeing and figuring out, hey, how can I learn from these countries, learn from these cultures? How can I take that and bring that back here so that we can start to innovate here? Because right now, nobody can say innovation is happening.
So is that where the answer lies in terms of we just can't break the diaspora ceiling? We can't get outside of the diaspora. We speak about we're doing so well in the United States and England, but in the Caribbean zone. And we are stuck right there. We're not breaking through there.
You know what? We always say that Trinis are everywhere, right? And Trinis are doing amazing things everywhere, but understand they had to go somewhere else to do those amazing things. Chances are because, look at it like this, right? We talk about the brain drain from long before I was born. The brain drain was and it's exasperated now because with technology, I don't have to ever work for a Trinidad company. I could be in Trinidad. It's a lower cost of living than back in Toronto and most of the other islands.
And it's warm.
And I could work for other countries. So the brain drain is happening digitally, right? But if people are not upskilling, and if you have never seen what better looks like, how can you think outside the box? If you're not even seeing what better looks like, if you're not a part of what better looks like, if you're not traveling, if you're not learning, at bare minimum learning, like if you're not reading extra books or you're not...
Learn. I lived in Washington, D.C. for a few years, and the 90s into early 2000s, and the Smithsonian Institute, it's free to the public, right? And it's the Smithsonian and it's the Capitol. Those are the kind of two anchors and Howard University at one point. And I remember talking to Trinidadians who'd been living there for 20 years and they told me they never went to the Smithsonian, right? I said, but it's free. You could go and you don't have to love art, but just go and see what it looks like, right? Go to that. They didn't want it. So this hesitancy towards learning is something that has been part and parcel, I think, of our culture because it extends to the public service, right? The civil service, which a lot of policies and our interaction as private citizens still have to engage with. So that to land in Trinidad, we still have to fill out a form on paper, right? We still have those kind of things, right? Just recently they
you
updated
do it
the dress
online
code.
and you still have to do the paperwork.
Yeah, right. So we have some systems that you talk about outdated. My buddy used to say we're Trinidad is 50 years behind the rest of the world. I'm probably bringing it up to about 10, 15 years behind the rest of the world in terms of updating systems. And it expands across all industries, including the music industry. Unfortunately, right? But I think the critical thing for me is this idea of not wanting to learn something new. People are hesitant to learn. I don't like reading a book becomes a difficult thing. Who does that anymore?
Because
I can find it everything on my phone. Well, read a book and see something that's not on
because
your phone.
learning evokes change. And when most people fear change. So they want to keep everything the same because I don't have to learn and I don't have to change. If you pick up a book, if that book did its job, you could read one page and have a whole different perspective.
Exactly.
Right? But because we have that big fear of change, it just doesn't happen. Something as simple as I was in a restaurant in Florida and there was a tablet on the desk, on the table, right? And the tablet said, call the waiter, view the menu, play games for kids, and pay now. And if you wanted to interact with a human, because in Trinidad we like to say we don't like technology, we want to deal with humans, right?
Yeah.
So if you want to deal with a human, fine, push a button, waiter comes. Or you can order right from the tablet, right? If that's what you want to do. And we called the waiter because my aunt wanted to hear some specials or whatever else, right? We order our food. By the time we're done, we hit the pay now button. She takes out her phone. She taps to pay her phone with her bank cards on it, on the tablet, payment made, and we don't have to wait for a waiter to come over or call the waiter. But by the time we're walking out, the waiter is already notified that we've paid, so he just said, hey, hope you enjoyed your meal, and we've already tipped them through the tablet as well. And I'm seeing that, and I'm like, there's nowhere in Trinidad that is a thing. Heck, half the restaurants are still telling you we might not accept credit card or links over $20.
Yeah. Does Encash, the Republic Bank has Encash, which is a kind of phone-based wallet, I understand. Does not work in terms of that similar situation you just described?
Now, if I was somebody else and afraid of getting in trouble, I would toe the company line. The problem with Encash is that it doesn't solve a problem, and it still adds friction.
It's a facilitator.
Yeah, but it adds friction. So I'll give you a perfect example, right? So let's say you go, I don't know, you come to a restaurant, and the restaurant has a Lynx terminal that can take Lynx cards or credit cards, and you have Encash. Now, in order to use Encash, I have to be a Trinidad citizen, so that rules out anybody else traveling. That's a big problem. I have to then be able to load money into my account. If you're with Republic Bank, that's immediate. If you're with other banks, it takes a day to 3 days or whatever, right?
And it's not free to load.
And it's not free to load. I have to pay money to load money into the wallet to then use it. So when you're sitting down in a restaurant and a restaurant says, how do you want to pay? Do you want to use the Lynx machine or do you want to use Encash? Well, it doesn't cost me money to take out my bank card and tap to pay on your machine, and that's it. But in order to use Encash, I have to pay to use it because I have to load money. And then after loading money, if I'm not with Republic Bank and I'm with another bank and it takes time for the money to load, then I have to send it across. So it just adds more friction. So the only time I use Encash is if the business is probably in Caranage by the fish fry and they don't have a Lynx machine whatsoever, and Encash is the only form of money, and I don't really carry cash, I would then use Encash. But that's the one in the blue moon.
Outlier.
That's the outlier.
All right.
So I'd like to get back to 2 points. One, when you're talking about exploiting the different platforms and so on, it seems to be, if I'm a performer and I really don't have a team, it's a lot of work.
I'm
providing content and all these.
I'm glad you brought that point up because I'm a solopreneur. There's only me. So everything you see from TV, radio, articles, blogs, live streaming, me traveling, workshops, hosting, it's only me. I outperform every single company when it comes to marketing in the entire country. Every single company in Trinidad. There isn't a content creator in Trinidad. There isn't a content creator in the Caribbean. There's one out of Jamaica. Shout outs to Kalila Reynolds. But she also has a team. There isn't anybody who is learning the systems, and I just have systems. I just understand the systems so well that I'm able to punch 1,000 times above me as an individual. That allows me now to create on every single medium. Think about that. And you've been in media for a long time. How many people do you know are on all social media platforms creating content on social, write in the newspapers in multiple countries, are on a radio 3-hour program, are on TV, blog, and still have YouTube channel? How many people do you know?
Me.
So that makes but that's good. But it gets to a point now where again people look into like, wow, that you must have a team. I'm like, no, I just have learned how to put systems in place. I've learned how these things work, and that's way I can.
No, but that's your full-time, accepted, absolutely dedicated
it
job.
Wasn't. There was a point
it became that.
Yeah, but even when it wasn't full time, I was still doing it. So there was a point in time where I was working a 9 to 5 and I was still doing what I was doing. There was a point in time where when I was doing my smartphone business outside of TV, matter of fact, I was still kind of doing TV, just kind of part time, but I was still doing all the things that I'm doing. For me, what I do or what I'm learning every single year is I'm always learning, and I'm learning about the new tools. Like just this last week, I showed everybody my tech haul, and I have a video coming out as to why I bought all these pieces of tech, as to how it's going to simplify my workflow on the road, because now I'm traveling a hell of a lot more. So now I need a mobile toolkit to be able to do everything that I do at home. I need to do that on the road. So when I show people, hey, I bought this because this does X, Y, and Z for me, it works together with this and it works together with that. When you put it all together and you can build out your workflows, that's what people have to learn, and that's what people have to master. And that is what people are not doing.
Can you teach work ethic?
Yes,
because you're dry.
Yes, you can't expose people to the concept.
No, we could talk about work ethic, but can I teach you to internalize
I could teach you. I could teach you the systems. I could teach you workflows. I don't think
the rest is up to you.
The rest is up to you.
Because you're clearly driven.
But it's also because of what I consume. I have goals that mean something to me. I'm passionate about what I do, and I think that's the key that separates people from a lot. Most people are not doing anything they're passionate about.
Well, talking about passion, you mentioned that you don't think that anybody in the Caribbean is doing this to optimum and so on. So the thought that came to my head is, all of these artists have their own marketing manager and promotions manager and so on.
Friends
who probably are shortchanging the people they represent.
Absolutely.
But do they know that?
But do they know that? And absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think they know.
And they don't know. And you know what? And I think they don't know. They have their friends,
trust,
and out of trust. And I mean, there's a good bit of artists that have reached out to me. The only problem is, like, there's a couple of artists that I should have been working with. The only problem is that I myself am a brand, right? And I myself am growing, and I myself are just not here, and I'm doing other things as well. And if their team members were involved in workshops that I'm at, because I've done work with Music TT, shout out to Melissa Jimenez. Like we talk all the time about things that we can do to help artists, but it's to get the artist team members into these initiatives to then go back and then help your artists do better. That is what is not happening, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to feel like they're out of place. Nobody wants to feel like they're not giving the artist the best things. And I think that's also why they reject a lot of information, because they don't know it. And again, if they don't know it, that means they have to learn, and that means they have to change. Why do all of that when I can keep giving my artists the exact same thing and still tell them to release the music by a certain time? You got to go from gig to gig and still preach the same old, because that's what everybody knows, right? So I don't think the team members themselves are upskilling to be able to give the best advice and to be a more productive member of each artist's team. And that's a shame, because we have some amazing talent.
So before we go to summarize, what would you say are the top 5 strategies that soca artists need to engage to market themselves?
So the first thing would be, learn digital assets, learn what are digital assets and what you need. So that would be things like your website, your email list, your CRM, your customer relationship manager tool to manage your relationships with your audience, your SMS list, your push notification list. Learn what digital assets are and get those things into your brand. The second thing would be, if you have a team, get somebody in your team, dedicate them to learning digital marketing, right? Tell them, this is your job. We need you to learn this because you're going to be even more valuable if you help us to grow this brand. We have the content, we have the content, we have the music, but you need to be able to get that out to the platform. The third thing would be, if you're a solo act and you don't have a team, then unfortunately, like every other business owner starting out, you're going to have to wear multiple hats. So I would recommend you start learning things like digital marketing, also content marketing. And if you could learn those 2 things, you can jump on a platform like HubSpot, Yoast.com, YOAST, Yoast.com. If you can learn digital marketing and content marketing, that would go a long way for your brand as a solo act. Fourth thing would be, every artist should start learning about the various ways that you can monetize. Gigs is great. I'm not telling you cut down on gigs. Gigs is great, but you need to start learning about what are the other ways that we can start to monetize. If I create content, what are the platforms that we can create content on in the Caribbean that are going to allow us to get paid, like a YouTube? We keep neglecting YouTube, but forget YouTube as a search engine. Speaking of YouTube, stop giving your content to certain channels, as Nigel pointed out. Build your own channel. That way your name gets searched and you can have that revenue coming back to you. There's no reason why you should be giving it to a third party channel. Build your own channel so that revenue starts to come back to you, and it also aids in your discoverability. And the fifth and final thing in terms of building your digital presence, I would say, is to experiment. Stop talking about what's tried and true and what the music industry has been doing for the last hundreds of years, or whatever the case is. Things are changing every single day. You need to evolve and change with it. If I'm learning something new every single day, you and your team should be on that same page as well, and experiment. You do not know what's going to work until you put it out there and try it for yourself, and either you get a good result or a bad result. Most importantly, you still learn. So those would be my 5 things.
Yeah, I just want to I'm talking to Laura on WhatsApp, and the thing that sticks with me is the idea of the website, which is one of the points you just mentioned there. And it's something that, I mean, websites are old in the sense of when Tim Berners-Lee created the first one, but the idea that artists don't see the need for a website is still baffling to me. And I really and truly am unsure why. People have told me, well, I don't need a website. I have an Instagram page. I don't need a website. I have a Facebook page, right? And I say, but these algorithms change the look, the layout, everything often, and they don't tell you up front.
They can suspend you, ban you.
All kind of things. So you have a website. No, it doesn't make sense. But I also wonder if their engagement, because I still think a lot of artists are thinking very locally, right? They only think about, I'm a Trinidadian, I'm going to make a song for Trinidad Carnival, and after that, it's all over, right? And if I'm lucky, I might perform up the islands and that kind of stuff. But the idea, there's a phrase that somebody had used elsewhere in the trade that, you create locally, you collaborate regionally, but you sell internationally as a kind of way that we're supposed to be selling, certainly here in Trinidad and Tobago. And it's not something that I think is on the tip of the tongue of every artist. Their just focus is get a popular song, because it's a race. A couple hundred songs were released Boxing Day, right? So it's and radio stations can't hear a couple hundred songs in that short of time. So they find which would, certainly they go who is most popular. We'll be looking for what Kes has, what Bungie have, what Marshall have, and Michael Tasia, who's very popular this year. And once they've found and they've whittled it down to about 20 songs that they know it got actually.
They run with it.
That's it, right? And artists may recognize, well, I ain't gonna get that this year, and they're happy with that, because there's also this drive by artists. I just want to make a record, because it's almost like a rite of passage. Yeah, so because you don't necessarily have to perform in effect, but you have to have a recording, right? And once you have that recording, you're good. I was listening to a record by 2 artists. One had an international label deal at one point. The other one is a Road March winner. And they did a collaboration. And I listened to it, and I remember thinking that what I was hearing didn't sound audibly proper. And I said, but this thing is out of tune. It's almost like a raw demo. What's going on here? And the other producers said, no, that's a song. They needed to get it in before a certain amount of time, so they just dropped it. So there's this urgency to create, and certainly in this Carnival 2024, which has a shortened season because of we operate on the Easter dates as it was, and on Ash Wednesday dates. We didn't have enough prep time, so people are just rushing to get it out. If the song doesn't hit, they don't care. They say, fine, we just look forward to next year and we move forward. And that has been perpetuating, going all the way back to the Calypso era, going way, way, way back, right? Because we were talking earlier about the idea of learning and the ability to learn. Some years ago, Tuku under Brother Resistance, rest in peace, he had organized something with Right Tech about the business of music, and he did this workshop kind of thing. Not workshop, it's course, right? And they had modules, about 10 or 12 modules, and I was privileged enough to teach one of them on the live music industry. But when you looked in the audience, I didn't see Calypsonians, right? I remember asking one of the facilitators what happened, and she told me that how generally a lot of the people didn't see the need for it. And then Tuco they had some funding, and they said, okay, we will pay for the Calypsonians to come to this course. And I'm saying, but this is a Tuco sponsored event. Why aren't 100 people coming into this thing to understand and learn the business of music? They weren't interested. And before this particular course, another marketing person, Janine Charles Ferry, rest in peace again, she offered a particular course on marketing, right, for the artists, and this was held at the library in down in on St. Vincent Street, St. Vincent Knox, Pembroke, Abercrombie, sorry, and that room, particular room, holds about 60 people. I remember being there and counting 60 chairs. There were 12 people. So there's this habit. I don't know if it's a bad habit. I don't know if habit is the right word. Where artists within our creative industries are not necessarily even willing to learn. This is a hustle. I'm going to get there, and I have to get to the finishing point faster than anybody else. I have to get to the march graph. I do have to, and if I don't get to the march graph, well, the judges teeth and that kind of stuff. But there's this attitude towards our industry which is not business focused, which is unfortunate because this is a business.
It's a business.
Right? Just like broadcasting is a business. Right? You're not doing this because they like to hear your voice on the radio.
Each artist is a sole trader, you know. Is a business person.
They don't see it like that. I don't know how many of them are registered, right? We keep mentioning Marshall's name quite often, and I'm sure there are others who have registered their companies and they have all their ducks in a row. They have publishing companies separate, and they have the live music industry properly set, and they have the copyrights. Make sure it's it's not registered, but it's here, and they have registration. They literally pay for registration in the United States. We have to pay for registration of copyright, but they do all the things that are necessary for a kind of threshold of what the American music industry operates, since we live in the Americas. And Marshall is one person. And in the music industry, he's not even at the top of the independent sector, right? So we have a long way to go. And I think it's incumbent upon, us, we could tell people what to do. Journalists could write about it, radio, podcasters, whatever. But the artists themselves have to get serious about this business and move out of the idea of that this is a grand hustle. Because I don't think soca is going to die because artists aren't business people. They said that about Calypso. It was easy for people to just come in and thief a Calypso and go. And luckily for us, we all know the story about Lord Invader. His song was stolen by Maury Amsterdam, our comic, given to the Andrews sisters. But when they went to court, luckily for him, I should say, the owner of the Calypso tent printed the lyrics in a booklet. So there was evidence of printed lyrics. And Lana Belasco, which did this thing, will come and transcribe folk melodies and register it in America. So there was evidence. But the idea of the artists themselves, Lord Invader, saying, I think I should register this in the States, because at that time he was able to travel to the States. That idea of seeing there's a future beyond the immediacy of our music industry is something that I don't know if it can be taught. You can't teach work ethics. I think we were saying that earlier. But there has to be some idea about the seriousness of what this thing is. It's not a simple hustle where anybody can wash your foot and jump in. This is a symptom
of a much larger problem, because most business owners in Trinidad still think of it as a hustle. They still treat their business as a hustle. And when you don't have the places, so like back in Canada and the States and in Europe, if I want to learn about technology at no cost, I could walk into Apple. Apple teaches you how to build apps. They teach you how to do photography. They teach you how to build games. They teach you all these things at no cost. And we have so many places where we can learn at a high level how to do things. But we don't have that in Trinidad. We don't have a teaching culture so that we could then grow and evolve. And everybody's still trying to hold on to the information as best as they can so that they use that as, a way for them to stay above, a cut above the rest. So until that changes within the culture, not much is going to change. And everybody's going to treat this as a hustle, and you're not really going to see much of anything different.
Gentlemen, thank you for coming in. I think this has been a useful discussion. I hope some soca artists were paying attention and some are members of their team.
The friends.
Roger Lee, Dominic Kalipersad.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.
This has been Take Two.
Thank you for having us.